So what essentially happened is that on July 7th, Coty agreed to hand the Gucci beauty license back to Kering roughly a year ahead of its 2028 expiry in exchange for approximately $400 million. Read narrowly, it's a tidy piece of balance sheet management. Read structurally, it's a cleaner signal yet of a company monetizing its future to survive in its present. The mechanics are worth resetting precisely because they encode the power balance. Coty collects $250 million at signing and up to a further $150 million by 30th September 2027, of which as much as $30 million is contingent on transaction criteria. It also sells carrying sufficient Gucci beauty inventory to bridge the handover and books roughly $30 million in cash taxes. L'Oreal, which acquired Kering Beauty unit and holds the incoming 50-year license, reimburses Kering for about 70% of the combined early redemption and the inventory cost. In the words of one person close to the deal, Kering is paying Coty to keep L'Oreal happy. The proceeds, Coty says, go into the debt reduction and reinvestment in priority brands such as Hugo Boss and Marc Jacobs. Every licensee carries an expiry, and every expiry is a repricing window. At that window, the brand owner holds two exit options the licensee cannot control. It can reclaim the category and bring the beauty in-house, or it can move to a preferred operator. Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel and welcome back to a dual episode of Capital Insights as well as Business of Luxury. Today we wanted to share with you the licensee's dilemma and how Coty's distress is repricing the beauty licensing. We're going to do a deep dive on how a levered licensee that runs brand equity that it does not own becomes a forced seller of its own contracts. The Gucci exit is the template and the accessible prestige fragrance map is quietly consolidating around two buyers. Let's start with the selling of the crown jewel. This is something that we have already done a detailed video on before. Do check out that video also. So what essentially happened is that on July 7th, Coty agreed to hand the Gucci beauty license back to Kering roughly a year ahead of its 2028 expiry in exchange for approximately $400 million. Read narrowly, it's a tidy piece of balance sheet management. Read structurally, it's a cleaner signal yet of a company monetizing its future to survive in its present. The mechanics are worth resetting precisely because they encode the power balance. Coty collects $250 million at signing and up to a further $150 million by 30th September 2027, of which as much as $30 million is contingent on transaction criteria. It also sells carrying sufficient Gucci beauty inventory to bridge the handover and books roughly $30 million in cash taxes. L'Oreal, which acquired Kering Beauty unit and holds the incoming 50-year license, reimburses Kering for about 70% of the combined early redemption and the inventory cost. In the words of one person close to the deal, Kering is paying Coty to keep L'Oreal happy. The proceeds, Coty says, go into the debt reduction and reinvestment in priority brands such as Hugo Boss and Marc Jacobs. The tell out here is not the price, but it's the asset that has left. Gucci was not a marginal line in Coty's prestige portfolio. Barclays put it at roughly 10% of the group's revenue, and the franchise had grown more than 60% since 2019. Analysts have called it the crown jewel of the portfolio with the potential to mirror the trajectory of L'Oreal engineered Saint Laurent, a company that surrenders its single fastest growing prestige asset to raise cash is not pruning. It is doing the one thing that a going concern is supposed to avoid, that is selling the compounding engine to service the liabilities. What will be left of Coty in a few years' time is at this point the correct question and not a rhetorical one. And this brings us to the most important inference, that is why the licensing model unwinds under leverage. Coty is at its core a licensee. In fragrance, now around 2/3 of the business, it rents brand equity that it does not own. Gucci, Burberry, Hugo Boss, Calvin Klein, Chloe, Marc Jacobs, Davidoff. The economics of that model are attractive in the good years and structurally fragile in the bad ones. And the fragility has one specific shape worth naming for the allocator. Every licensee carries an expiry, and every expiry is a repricing window. At that window, the brand owner holds two exit options the licensee cannot control. It can reclaim the category and bring the beauty in-house, or it can move to a preferred operator. Precisely the Kering to L'Oreal path. Or it can also reshop the license to the highest external bidder. In either case, the licensee's continued participation is contingent and not owned. The brand equity that drives the profit and loss sits in someone else's balance sheet. Leverage is the accelerant out here. A well-capitalized licensee can wait out a renewal cycle, negotiate from strength, and let the option value of a long-dated contract accrue. A distressed one cannot. When the balance sheet needs cash and equity is impaired, the licensee's own contracts become the most liquid asset that it has, and it is pushed towards monetizing them early at a discount to their run rate into the hands of whoever is bidding. Distress converts a portfolio of licenses from an asset base into a liquidation queue. The order of the queue is set by which brand owners want their category back and which specialist buyers are willing to pay. Essentially, distress does not merely lower the price of a license, it removes the licensee's ability to choose whether and when to sell it at all. This is the transferable primitive and it generalizes well beyond COTI. Any operator whose revenues rest on renewable rights to third-party equity, for example, beauty licenses, duty-free concessionaries, branded goods licenses, even some franchise models, trades at a structural discount to the owner of the same equity, and that discount widens non-linearly as leverage rises. The Gucci exit is simply the cleanest recent illustration of that mechanism firing. Let's do a sector focus now and let's try and understand as to who ends up owning the accessible prestige fragrance. Now, if Coty is the first seller, the more durable question is who the structural buyers are. The emerging answer is two-tier consolidation of prestige fragrance around two very different acquirers, each defined by where it sits on the luxury spectrum. At the top sits L'Oreal, absorbing the ultra-luxury tier directly into L'Oreal Luxe. Gucci now joining Prada, Valentino, YSL via the Kering Beauty transaction, Creed, Bottega Veneta, and Balenciaga. This is not licensing arbitrage, it is brand owner adjacent operator taking permanent 50-year control of the highest margin houses. At the accessible prestige tier sits Inter Parfums, the Paris-listed specialist that has spent 2 decades compounding on exactly the brands a distressed Coty would shed. Heron would also like to point out that Miss Tweed reported in April that Inter Parfums was in early talks over Hugo Boss and more advanced talks over Burberry. Both Coty and Inter Parfums denied, and had discussions at the time in the language nearly identical to the denials that preceded the Gucci deal. The Burberry first logic is structural, not speculative. Inter Parfums held the Burberry license through the end of 2023 before Coty took it, and is said to have already tabled an offer and knows the asset intimately. Burberry Goddess is Coty's biggest launch ever, and Hugo Boss became the number 2 men's fragrance franchise in Europe in the second half of last year. These are not distressed assets. They are precisely the profitable renewable rights franchisee a specialist consolidator is built to house, and precisely what a levered licensee is most tempted to sell. This snapshot gives you the prestige fragrance consolidation map from franchisee to tier to direction of travel, the status, and where it exactly sits. The shape that falls out is a barbell. L'Oreal takes the crown jewels into permanent ownership, Inter Parfums aggregates the accessible prestige mid-tier into specialist platform, and Coty is left as the seller funding both the ends of consolidation. The denials matter less than the structural pull-out here. A distressed licensee and a well-capitalized specialist with prior knowledge of the assets is a transaction waiting for a particular price. Let's also talk about the distress that is being made visible because the market has already written the pieces into the tape. Coty trades at 2.2 to 2.3, a market capitalization of roughly $1.9 billion, down more than 80% from the start of 2024 and well below the 52-week high of $7. The net debt sits around $3.2 billion against a shrinking loss-making revenue base of about $5.8 billion trailing. And this snapshot gives you Coty at a glance from the share price to the market capitalization, the net debt, price to sales, the score, and the controlling holder. Now, the single most instructive figure out here is the 0.34x price to sales multiple. It is the governance discount rendered numerically. The market is paying roughly a third of the revenue for business whose highest quality cash flows are contingent on licenses that it does not control, against L'Oreal Luxe multiples, an order of magnitude richer for owning the same categories outright. Let's wrap up this video with the allocator read, the owned versus the licensed premium. Strip away the news flow and Coty resolves into single portable idea for anyone underwriting luxury and consumer equity. Control of the beauty profit and loss is a governance premium, and dependence on renewable licensing is a governance discount. The two are essentially the same coin. Brand owners who took beauty in-house, for example, the Hermes model, command a premium precisely because their compounding is not contingent on counterparty renewal decision. Licensees live on the other side of that ledger. What is left of Coty in a few years is therefore knowable in outline, if not in timing. The most likely go-forward shape is a smaller, prestige fragrance house built around Hugo Boss if it is retained, Marc Jacobs, Calvin Klein, Chloe, and other owned and Kylie assets, provided that the management can staunch the license date, and also provided that the controlling shareholder does not force a fuller breakup. The Consumer Beauty Review, for example, CoverGirl, Rimmel, Sally Hansen, Max Factor, all point to the same direction if a company is contracting deliberately at both the ends. Prestige licenses departing and mass brands on the block. For our viewers, the read here is twofold. First and foremost, treat the owned versus licensed axis as the first order screen in luxury and beauty names. It is a cleaner predictor of the multiple durability than the growth optics. Secondly, the accessible prestige consolidation is itself an investable structure. Interparfums, a disciplined aggregator on one side, L'Oreal Luxe, as an ultra-luxury owner on the other end, and the distressed licensee as the source of supply. The Gucci exit was chapter 1. Burberry, whatever the current denials are, is the chapter that the map says comes next. The bottom line out here being that Coty's distress is repricing the beauty licensing in real time. The mechanism is general, that is, a levered licensee forced to sell contracts that it does not own. The consolidation that it feeds, that is around the L'Oreal and Interparfums, is specific and ongoing. What we like to leave you with is own the equity and not the rental. That's all that we have for you in this video. Stay tuned and for our next one.